Hello everyone, my name is Rob and I am an archaeologist, and today I thought I'd look at Minecraft structures and try to put them in chronological order. Although there's no real way to know exactly when structures were built in Minecraft, there are some clues within the structures that could help us identify which buildings came first and which ones are pretty modern. So I'm going to start off in the Overworld, and we're going to go from the most modern structures to the least modern structures. And obviously the most modern of Minecraft structures is the village. There's not a lot to say about this really. There's nothing to suggest that these structures are older than what they look like. So I'm going to say that the village is our number one structure in terms of chronology. Pillager outposts, woodland mansions and igloos are also inhabited in the Minecraft world, and therefore suggests that these are fairly modern structures. Swamp huts similarly should be fairly modern, but because obviously witches could potentially live for a long amount of time, it is in theory possible that these structures are a bit older than villages. Then we have desert wells, which are I think a bit older than our modern structures, and that's because you do kind of get this build up of deposits around it, which seems to suggest they've been here for a while, but at the same time you don't have any damage on them, which seems to suggest maybe they are fairly recent or considered. Next up we have mine shafts. Although these structures do appear to be fairly modern, there is definitely some signs of decay. You've got rails missing from various places, you've got what I would interpret as cave collapse in some areas. Stuff like this suggests that they have been around a bit longer than villages. Now, abandoned or zombie villages, these ones have been around for a bit longer. You've definitely got cobwebs, which could be fairly recent to be fair, but you've definitely got blocks missing from all the houses, and that to me suggests that these structures have been around for a fairly long amount of time. Now, the relationship between abandoned villages and mine shafts is a bit more complex. If these structures were usually found together, I would say that they were definitely contemporary. But because they're not usually found together and the damage in the abandoned villages seems to be a bit more extensive, I would suggest that these structures here are slightly older than the mine shafts. Shipwrecks, and by association, buried treasure. Now, these structures, as you can see, have suffered clear damage, and this shows that these structures have been here for a while. The presence of buried treasure reminds me of the golden age of piracy, so it seems like these structures would have been here a few hundred years, which makes them the oldest structure we've seen yet. Next up, it's dungeons. Now, these little structures here are quite difficult to date. They do seem to be cut into by mine shafts, which suggests that they are earlier. They're already here when the mine shafts come along. Plus there's a lot of moss on the ground as well. So I think that these structures are older than the mine shafts and therefore probably around the same time as the shipwrecks. Now, going further back in time from the shipwrecks, we have the ocean ruins. Now, these structures don't look particularly impressive, but they clearly have sustained a large amount of damage. Although you could argue that the damage they've sustained is quite similar to that of the shipwrecks. This is made out of stone and therefore it should be more durable than the shipwrecks, and therefore I suspect these ocean ruins are older. Now, if we use the real world as reference, the difference in time period between the structures I've just shown you and the ones I'm going to show you next is quite significant. We are looking at the desert pyramid. You've got your classic pyramid structure here. If we go inside this building, you can see this interesting pattern on the floor, all these little side niches that could be used for various rituals. Now, we can actually find some clues to these structures in here. The only perishable items you have is rotten flesh, so it does seem like these structures have been here for a long time. We do, however, have a few more clues. First of all, occasionally in these chests you can find an enchanted book, which suggests the population that built these structures knew writing. So we're dealing with history rather than prehistory. And also underneath this pressure plate you've got TNT. So whoever built these pyramids clearly had an understanding of magic, gunpowder and writing. Something else to consider is that some of these structures are buried under a lot of sand. The amount of sand you sometimes find in these structures seems to suggest these structures are incredibly old. Now something that's really interesting is the relationship between the desert temples and the jungle temples. These structures here are not too dissimilar. If you go down here, you have this redstone. You have a series of redstone trap. You have very similar loot within the chests, and also you've got a similar kind of style. You've got these niches all the way down, which is what we had in the temples as well. And therefore I would suggest that these structures and the temple structures are probably contemporary. You also have this sloping roof that is very similar to the desert temples, and I would suggest that if they're not contemporary, they're at least quite close chronologically. And one of the reasons I think these two structures are connected is because of the ocean monuments. Now these enormous underground structures are difficult to interpret. The first thing to note is that they are absolutely pristine, but when we come to style, you can clearly see the similarities between this structure and the jungle and desert pyramids. Now the fact the structure hasn't decayed like the ocean ruins is probably due to the material it's made out of. The prismarine looks more waterproof and therefore would sustain much less damage than the stone brick counterpart. So moving even further back in time, we have some structures that have to do with other dimensions, starting off with the ruined portal. There's quite a few of these ruined portals throughout the Minecraft world, but one interesting thing about them is that they're always broken. Now these structures are made out of obsidian, which is one of the toughest materials in Minecraft, so the fact that these structures have suffered some damage means they've been here for a long time. And one of the oldest structures in Minecraft is the Stronghold. Now although stylistically this kind of design with the stone bricks reminds me of more modern structures, something you do find fairly often in strongholds is this, ravines that go all the way through it. Now these ravines must be fairly old. The big transformations in the landscape that occur over many centuries, and that seems to suggest these strongholds have been here for millennia. Something that is very interesting of strongholds is that you do get these libraries, and this is an indication that whoever built the stronghold not only could read and write but created a whole corpus of literature that was kept here. However, something that is possible is that this structure started off as something much smaller and was later on expanded with inclusion of this library. Now the overworld shares a lot of commonalities with our world, but let's go and explore the nether and see what structures are there. Now because the overworld and the nether are essentially two completely different worlds, I can't really compare their history. One exception is obviously the ruined portals. Because of the similarities between these portals and the ones in the overworld, I definitely think these are contemporary. Now there's only two other structures in the nether, that is the bastion remnant and the nether fortress. Now these bastion remnants are pretty run down. It's a common theme with all of them. They seem to be heavily damaged. Furthermore, as you can see here, it seems like the basalt has been used to repair some of the earlier structures. Now either these structures are contemporary with the ruined portals, alternatively a different theory could be that these structures have sustained more recent damage. The more I explore the nether, the more it seems like some big catastrophic event happened here. If there was some kind of piglin war over gold, that could explain the damage to the bastions. But the years of repair that this bastion seems to have gone through suggest that the structure has been around for a long time. The only other structure you will find in the nether is this, the nether fortress. Now these enormous structures also have some damage, as you can see here, but overall there's very little damage to the body of the structure. Partly this may be due to the more resistant material they're made out of, but potentially it means that these structures are more recent than the bastions. In fact, it could be argued that these bridges are not in fact damaged, but they are incomplete. Either these structures were being built by the piglins and they were abandoned, or they are still being constructed as we speak. Now we have one more dimension left to visit. We find ourselves in the end dimension. Now there's very little to talk about here in the way of structures. First of all, we got these pillars made out of obsidian. Now all of this seems very magical. Now given that the stronghold directly connects to this island, I would suggest that those two structures are probably contemporary. And that leads us to the last structure we're going to be looking at today in Minecraft. the end city and associated end ships. Now, the impression you get from these end cities and end ships is that it is futuristic. We are in a completely different dimension, a completely different universe, where civilization has advanced much further forward than we have on Earth. So if I had to guess in relation to the Minecraft chronology where the end cities are placed, I think these are ancient structures built by a very advanced civilization. So there you have it. That's my take on the chronology and history of Minecraft structures. If you have your own opinion or you believe I got something wrong, please feel free to comment below and I may do a part 2. And if you enjoyed this video, do let me know, and please remember to comment, like and subscribe to the channel. But until next time, thank you all for watching. I've been Rob. Bye!